Okay, so the first thing we should probably cover is what in the heck is economics, right? You've probably heard it before, but if I asked you to like pause and say, what is economics? You'd probably either say the study of the stock market, the study of money, or maybe, just maybe you might say like the study of markets. And that last one might be close. But actually economics is a much more broad subject. And to me, that makes it way more interesting and way more relevant. And so I'll actually bait you in to thinking about economics with a story. It's actually one of my favorite stories that we ever experienced here at Dorsal. So way back in 2013, we were on a really cheap budget. So we wanted to do a trip, saltwater fly fishing for a couple $100. And so we found a way to get to the Bahamas for like $100, $200 in flights, but we had to kind of jump around to Nassau and then puddle hop to an island. It was kind of a big ordeal, but we got there and we found this rental house that gave us a free boat with our kind of rental. And it was awesome, right? So we could have a boat, we could have a house, so we didn't have to pay for guides, we could just kind of go out there and go fly fishing. And so for the first 2 days we found fish, but they were really picky. They weren't eating, just a lot of frustration. I mean, we made the joke that we probably threw at 200 fish in one day and couldn't get a single one to bite. And so we decided the next day, which hilariously was my birthday, that we would take this rental boat out to these kind of uninhabited islands about 13 miles off the coast. Again, as young dudes, it's kind of a great plan. We thought it'd be great because we knew there'd be unpressured fish. It'd be a lot of fun. It would be, I mean, a heck of a birthday. And so we set out and we take off into the Bahamian Gulf out to these uninhabited islands. Well, we fish out there all day long, and as fate would have it, we don't find any fish. Basically, the channels were too deep, the flats weren't receiving enough water, it just wasn't good for bonefish. And so around 5 p.m., the guy, one of my buds who was kind of in charge of running the boat, was like, hey, we should probably go in. Like we've got to make this long run back across the bay, 13 miles, we're losing light, like we should probably go. And we all pile on the boat, we throw our gear in, get everything locked down, and he goes to turn over the motor and nothing happens. But this guy just starts laughing. He just thought, like, what in the world's happening? Started laughing hysterically, and I go, dude, what's wrong? He goes, I'm pretty sure we're out of gas. Remember how we don't have a gas gauge on this free rental boat? I think we're out of gas. And we all clamber to the front hatch, rip it open, look at the gas tank, and sure enough, we're out of gas. At an uninhabited island, 13 miles off the coast, middle of nowhere. This is pre, I had a flip phone back then, so it wasn't like there was a lot of like good technology. We were using like one of those old handheld GPS. So we were kind of SOL. And we make the decision that we're near this uninhabited island and we should probably camp out there overnight to figure out what in the heck we're gonna do. And so what we do is actually swim the boat all the way to shore, anchor it, and at that moment, we decide to kind of circle the wagons and figure out what we have, right? Let's do a kind of an inventory of our resources. And this right here is economics, believe it or not. So what we do is we come in and we count and we're like, okay, we've got, a granola bar, we've got a couple bottles of water, we've got a couple of our kind of fishing kits. That's what we have. And then we're like, okay, so what can we do with this to achieve our stated goal of getting home?
We're going on 13 hours now, stranded on our island. We haven't had food in maybe 24 hours, and we have had no water in probably 15. Roll Tad.
And that right there in a nutshell is economics. So economics is the study of doing the best you can with what you have. Doing the best you can with what you have. And, I think the textbook definition of economics would say, how a society and individuals manage their scarce resources. Well, we can kind of unpack both of these to make them the same, right? So in the world, we have this thing called scarcity, right? There is just less stuff to go around for all of our wants. And each of one of us can kind of identify this, right? You do not have, 4,000 fishing rods in your garage, right? There you have more wants than you have the ability to buy, actually, no matter what your income is. There are more places you want to fish, or there are more places you want to hunt than you have days in the year to devote to them, right? You have scarcity. You have less of what you want, because that's just kind of how the way the world is, right? So scarcity drives all the energy and economics, because we are trying to figure out, how do we allocate less stuff for the most gain, least amount of stuff for the most gain. And so if we dial it back to my Bahamas story, we were being economists while we were being Robinson Crusoe on that island, right? We had limited amount of resources, like no gas, right? A couple bottles of water, some granola bars, and limited resources besides that. Like these islands, there weren't sand, they were rocky, kind of just scrub brush on them. And so what this meant for us is that we had to think about, okay, how can we use those resources to deliver our goal of getting us back? And if you think about it, there's a couple of options, right? So we could overnight and wait it out and hope that someone is going to drive by and pick us up. Now, here's the problem. We hadn't seen anyone all day in these uninhabited islands, so it didn't seem very likely that someone's going to show up. We could, distribute the resources, the water, the granola bars equally, so that everybody can kind of satiate their food and water needs. But at the same point, there's also another alternative, right? You could give one person all the resources so that they could be a runner and basically swim island to island, island to island, all the way back to the mainland to go get help, right? And this is actually, that point right there is a kind of interesting driving force in econ, right? Giving one person all of the resources seems very unfair, right? Very unequal. But if our stated goal is to get off the island, right, we are not actually focusing on the equality of those resources right then, right? We only have a stated goal of getting off the island, getting off this uninhabited island. So we might actually want to devote all the resources to one healthy cat and let him go and try to get help, right? That's where econ comes in and says, look, here's your stated objective, here's your stated goal, and here's the resources you have. What's the best way to get there? And so we actually kind of punted. And so for the first night, we just kind of sipped on the water, really tried to watch our resources. We didn't touch the food, and we decided to overnight. Now, I'll actually follow up, and we'll unpack the whole story with George in another video where we can kind of really do a film about it. But fate would have it, during way later into the next day, after we've overnighted, a fisherman actually came by, and his name was Reno. He was this really kind guy. He was actually taking out clients that day, and he drug us and our boat back to safety. And so we got really, really lucky in that regard, getting off the island. But if you think about this core problem, right, of having limited resources and a stated goal, that's econ. So when we unpack that definition, think about it now, okay? If you're the US government, right, all you do is economics, right? You have limited tax receipts from your citizens, and you have many wants, right? We want better schools, better military, better, everything, right? And you have limited means to do that. So how do you choose how to allocate those resources? Economics. If you are, getting ready for deer season, right? If you're a hunter and you have, 6 days that you can go out and hunt, how do you allocate those scarce days to hunting? If you're fishing, right, and you have 12 hours to fish in a day, how do you allocate those hours? Because you only have 12 hours of light. You can't get more, right? You have this binding, limiting consequence of hours. How do you use them in the best way? And if you think about this again, we've gone from US government, hunting, fishing, you go hiking, you can literally go almost any angle you want to, and it's going to be economics. And that's why I think economics is such a powerful toolkit. I think it's such an interesting toolkit. That's why I got my PhD in economics, because I think it really matters. It allows us to unlock our potential and also allow us to think critically about how we use and steward the resources around us. And so again, since this idea we're rolling with here, right, at Dorsal is kind of primarily targeted to the outdoors. I think a lot of folks who experience the outdoors, whether they're anglers or hunters, right, hikers, bikers, we think a lot about stewardship. How do we manage our natural resources to the best and highest potential? And that is an economics question. That's actually not, sadly enough, I don't think an ethics question. I don't think it's a, sadly enough, it's not even a biology question. It's an economics question. And so as we kind of move through kind of some core economics concepts here, I want us to always kind of come back to think about economics as the idea that we have limited stuff, tons of wants, and how do we balance those two? How do we make great decisions with the limited amount of stuff we have? Okay? So that's going to give us the foundation. Next, we're going to talk about opportunity costs, how we make decisions better in economics. From there, we'll talk about marginal analysis, right? How do we make clever decisions on the margin? And then from there, we'll be able to dive into really interesting questions about kind of balancing growth in our natural resources and harvest in our natural resources. How do we balance public and private lands and all those kind of things? And again, economics will enable us to unlock that. All right, thanks y'all.